Hi, I'm Pierre from Morales and welcome back to this series of video where together we learn how to code in Solidity. Today we're back in our Escrow contract where previously we have stated all of our variables and we started already by declaring our constructor function. If you haven't seen this or you don't know what an escrow is, I recommend you go check out that first video and then come back right here. Now we're going to jump straight to it, and actually what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be defining the rest of our functions that are right here. So we have init contract, which is basically going to initiate our contract. Then we have deposit, allowing the buyer to deposit his ether. Confirm delivery, which will basically finalize and transfer payment to the seller once delivered. And finally, withdraw, that will allow, in case there wasn't delivery, will allow the buyer to withdraw his funds. So we go straight to it with init contract. So basically this won't take any arguments, but what we want to make sure is that the escrow has not started yet. Now, if you remember, we had created this modifier last time, sorry, this one here, escrow not started, that verifies the current state. Now, basically, we're going to use this here, and we're going to say escrow not started. And this function is going to be public, simply. Now, what we want to do is we're basically going to come here and modify the state of these bools, right, of these variables, where we're going to be saying that when the seller calls this function, then we're going to change this to true. When the buyer calls this function, then we're going to set this to true, and then we're going to change the current state to awaiting payment. So in order to do so, we're simply going to do an if, saying that if the message.sender equals the buyer, in that case, we're going to simply say is buyer in equals true. So the buyer is in. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say if message.sender equals the seller address, then in that case, we're going to say is seller in? Yes. So true. Great. And now the last thing that we want to do is simply once both of them will have called this, so when the last of the two will call this function, well, in that case, what we want to do is we want to say that if is buyer in and is seller in are true, then in that case, what we want to do is we want to change the current state. We want it to be equal to state.awaiting payment. And that's it. Because if you look back at our enum right here, well, we know that it has multiple states, which are in fact just the states of our contract. The first one being not initiated, it's not started. Then awaiting payment. Once the payment is done, we're going to be waiting for delivery. Once delivery is confirmed by the buyer, then our contract is considered complete. So this is our function init contract. Simple enough. And we can move on to the next function, which is deposit. So deposit also doesn't take any arguments, but it can only be called by the buyer. Now, if you remember also from the previous video, we had built this modifier here that simply verifies that the person calling this is the buyer. If not, then only the buyer can call this function, just this message. So we're just adding this here, only buyer, to make sure it's only the buyer. And we're going to make this function public and also payable, because the buyer is going to be actually sending some funds through this function. So first thing we need to do is we need to require that the current state is actually awaiting payment. Just confirming that. And if it's not this, well then in that case we're going to say already paid. Simple. Now we're also going to require one thing. We want to make sure that the value that the user is sending through this, so message.value, is equal to the price, because the price is called as part of our constructor function, and this is what they agreed on, right? Now, if they both agreed, which they did as part of this init contract function, well then, this is the price that is expected. If not, then we're going to just say tell the user that wrong deposit amount, and he can just start and deposit again. This of course require cancels whatever transaction was done, and the funds won't be gone from his wallet. And once this is done, we're simply going to change the state to state.awaiting delivery. So payment was done. We move on to the next step of the contract, which is getting the delivery. Now, the delivery happens outside of the contract, right? Of course, it could be, a physical good, a delivery from something like Amazon, whatever you want to imagine. And only the buyer confirms delivery. And to do so, actually, we are going to, just add here the fact that only the buyer can call this. We're going to make this function payable and public. Now, payable, why? Because this is the function that, when it's called, will actually transfer the funds to the seller. So to do so, basically, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the current state is the state.awaiting delivery, right? Shouldn't be called otherwise. And if not, well, we say cannot, confirm delivery, simply. Okay, now if we are in this current state, then what we're going to do is simply transfer the funds. And so we were going to say seller.transfer, and we're going to transfer him the actual price that was to be paid, price. And then we're just going to change the state to state.complete, because complete, because it's done. Once the buyer confirms that he received the delivery, the funds are transferred to the seller, then our contract is finished, and this is where we just, we're done for today. But we have an additional function here, which is the withdraw function. Now this should also only be called by the buyer, because only he deposited money, right? So only he can withdraw it if ever he didn't, confirm delivery never came, he has to be able to access his funds. So it's going to be also a payable function, and we're going to call it, make it public. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to, well, same thing as above. So I'm actually going to copy this, because we want to make sure that, we're actually waiting delivery, but delivery never came. So if it, so yeah, that's what we're doing here. But if ever it's not the stage, then we're going to say cannot withdraw at this stage. Now, if it is though the right state, in that case, we're going to declare the address of the buyer, so message.sender, the person calling, right? We're going to declare it payable in order to be able to transfer to him the price. This way, he gets his funds back. And then we're also going to change the state. The state will be state.complete, because if he didn't receive anything, if he's withdrawing his money, it's in fact the end of this contract. All right, so that's it when it comes to the code. Now what we're going to move on to is actually testing this. So right here, you see, oops, sorry, right here, I'm going to just compile this. I get an error. Where is that? Okay, so I know where we get an error. This is my Python habits. In order to actually comment something, this is how you do it. Modifiers here too. Okay, and now I can compile this again. Okay, so it's all compiled. Now if we move here, we're going to be working, I'm going to just reset the values here. So to do this, I just switch here. Okay, so we're back at all the addresses here with 100 ether. And so to deploy it, actually, what we need to provide is what we gave in our constructor function, which means basically the address of the buyer, the address of the seller, and the price. Now what we're going to do is that this first address, this is going to be the buyer, this is going to be the seller. And so the address of the buyer is this one. The address of the seller is this one. And we're going to say that they agree on a price of 20. And we can hit transact. I'll bring the command line up here. Okay, so I click on transact. You see here, great, it's on, and if I open this up, we have all of our functions and all of our variables. So we have, the buyer, we have the seller, we have the price, 20, yeah, and we also have the current state will be, of course, not initiated. Now to get started, we know that both the buyer and the seller need to confirm that they're entering this contract. So to do this, right now, I have the address of the seller, and we're just gonna initiate contract. Great. And now it's the turn of the buyer to also come here and select initiate contract. Now, once it's done, we both know that, we know that they're both in it. So if we call current state, we see that it has changed to awaiting payment. So now action is on the buyer's side. So the buyer, what he needs to do is he needs to send 20 to this contract. And if he does less than that, we can try it out. And he tries to deposit 15. Well, he gets an error, and it says that it's the wrong deposit amount. Awesome. So, and you see his funds are still here. So actually, we're gonna this time put 20, and we call deposit again. Okay, nice. So his 20 are here. Right now the state has also changed. State is now awaiting delivery. You see here, it's 2, the second one. So 0, 1, 2, awaiting delivery. Now here is the moment where two things are open. It's either we receive the product, whatever it was, and therefore we call the confirm delivery function, or we withdraw our funds because we never got them. You can go play, have fun with these. We're going to directly confirm delivery. So I am the user, the buyer, sorry. So I can call the confirm delivery, only buyer, and I have received this, therefore confirming delivery should work, and the coins will actually be transferred to the seller. So if I click on this, for some reason you see that the console here tells us that it's an error. To be honest, I don't really understand why, because if we check the current state here, we see that we're at 3, and our current state 3 is complete. And if we come check the addresses up here, we see that, of course, this address, which is the buyer address, is missing 20 ETH because that's what they paid for, and the 20 ETH have actually been transferred to the seller address. So clearly it worked. I'm not sure why we get this address here, but our code is fully functioning, and our contract is done. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something. Of course, some things could be added to this contract. Maybe we will in the future. If you think of platforms that already exist that create such escrow contracts, they of course have additional levels of complexity just to make it more secure and safe for both parties. But so that's it. I'll talk to you in the next video, and until then, take care.